to where my core is located to complete this process.
Since the glory days of the original Doom back in 1993, there are some demons in particular that have come up as menacing foes for players time and time again. The Cyberdemon and the Spiderdemon, for instance, have become iconic as classic Doom villains. We've spoken about them over the past few days, and while they definitely take the cake when it comes to set-piece bosses throughout the history of Doom, a much more common enemy who is nearly as menacing as those two is the Baron of Hell, and its weaker cousin, the Hell Knight. Here in this feature, we'll continue our look back at some of the most iconic monsters throughout Doom's history, and focus on those two in particular. Barons of Hell appeared as enemies in the very first Doom, with a look very similar to that of the Cyberdemon, minus all of the mechanical and cybernetic enhancements, that is. They had the head and horns of a minotaur, a strong muscular torso, and two goat-like muscular legs, with massive amounts of health, a vicious slashing attack for close-range encounters, and the ability to throw fireballs from a distance. The Barons were by far among the most threatening enemies in the entire game. They appeared once again in Doom 2, of course, and were more or less identical to those we squared off against in the first game, but this time they were not alone. Doom 2, you see, also introduced a new demon known as the Hell Knight. And what exactly were these Hell Knights? Well, in quite simpler terms, they were basically the same as Barons of Hell, but weaker. Described quite literally as the weaker cousins of Barons, Hell Knights even looked almost identical to Barons of Hell. Hell Knights had the same combat abilities as Barons of Hell, the same furious melee attacks and ability to throw fireballs at you from a distance, but were much weaker in terms of durability, having only half as much health as Barons. Then came Doom 3, and as it did with so many other things, it changed things up quite a bit for both these demons. For starters, it did not have Barons of Hell, period. Instead, it gave more of a star billing to Hell Knights, which came up as much more threatening foes that functioned quite differently to how they'd functioned in previous games. From a visual perspective, the design of Hell Knights was changed significantly for Doom 3. They no longer sported a goat-like look, and no longer had horns, and were more grayish than they were tan. Their claws, mouth, and chest were soaked in blood, and their entire bodies were covered with scars and demonic runes, including a pentagram etched into their forehead. From a gameplay perspective, the Hell Knights were made much tougher and much more threatening. Essentially, they replaced Barons of Hell in all but name. They had twice as much health as they did in previous games, which meant about as much health as Barons, while they were also much larger in stature. They also had devastating melee attacks, including being able to bite you if you got too close, and could throw energy balls at you from a distance. By far, the Hell Knights were the toughest non-boss enemies in the entire game. And then came Doom 2016, and while it was a game that mostly went back to the aesthetic of the older Doom games while ditching most of what Doom 3 had done. With these two demons in particular, the 2016 reboot decided to have the best of both worlds. The Barons of Hell returned and looked very, very similar to how they had appeared in classic Doom titles, which made sense since those were the only Doom games it ever appeared in. And even in terms of combat, this demon harkened back to the original games. In addition to its classic melee and fireball attacks though, the Baron in 2016 also had a deadly AoE attack, which would see it viciously stomping at the ground to send out shockwaves. Then there were Hell Knights, which actually looked nothing like the Hell Knights from Doom 1, 2, and 64. Instead, their appearance hewed very closely to the Hell Knights in Doom 3. They didn't have horns, had clawed hands and feet, were very muscular. As opposed to Doom 3, Hell Knights in Doom 2016 had skulls that almost looked like they were completely exposed and devoid of any flesh on top. In combat, they functioned almost like a completely new enemy type though, and relied almost exclusively on melee attacks. Doom 2016's Hell Knights were hellishly agile, pun absolutely intended, using slams, punches, and slashes to lash out at the Doomslayer. They also tended to leap at players, and that in combination with their surprising speed meant that maintaining a safe distance away from them during combat was often the best strategy for dealing with them and avoiding damage. Like most other demons demons in the game, Doom 2016 also provided plenty of interesting new lore on both the Baron of Hell and the Hell Knight. The game describes the Barons as the highest-ranking soldiers in the Order of the Hell Knights, and as the royal guards of the unknown Dark Lord ruling over Hell. The UAC suspects that since the Barons of Hell have only grown in power, that must also mean that so too has their overlord. Interestingly enough, the UAC also have been incapable of capturing any Barons during their expeditions into Hell, while at least one manned expedition was said to have been a complete and total failure after it was attacked by Barons. Tablets found in the game also state that Barons of Hell rarely ever leave the realm. Then there are the Hell Knights, which interestingly enough no longer seem to be as related to the Barons, according to Doom 2016's lore that is. Originally loyal to the Great Serpent during the first age of Hell, after the Serpent was defeated by a being known as the Guardian, Hell Knights would go on to be placed in the fighting arenas of Hell, where they were turned into prized gladiators, with their primary purpose being to feed on any victims that were thrown to them by Hell's demon overlords for sport. Supposedly, the Hell Knights are also the protectors of some of the realm's most important relics. It has been confirmed that Hell Knights and Barons of Hell will both be returning in Doom Eternal, and really, given how iconic and enduring they've been throughout the history of the franchise over the years, that's only fitting. We're hoping that Doom Eternal will see them emerging with even greater combat abilities, but even if that ends up not happening, and they're brought over pretty much exactly like they were designed for Doom 2016, we're at least hoping there will be more lore dumps on both these demons. Either way, we'll know soon enough, because Doom Eternal is merely days away. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, please hit the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to switch on the notifications bell icon next to it. That way you'll never miss any of our videos. Thanks for watching.